They don't tell you when it happens. There's no announcement, no moment where someone pulls you aside and says, "You've become forgettable." It creeps in quietly. One day you walk into a room, say something you think is worth hearing, and the conversation moves on without you. No one asks for more. No one leans in. You laugh it off, tell yourself people are just distracted, but a thin, sharp truth presses against the edge of your mind. Somewhere along the way, I stopped matching to them. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Maybe that's why it happens to so many. We stop showing the parts of ourselves that carry any risk, the thoughts that reveal depth, the opinions that might spark disagreement. We learn to be polite, agreeable, predictable, safe. But safe is rarely magnetic. It's not that people are cruel. Attention follows life, and life radiates from passion, curiosity, and the courage to show yourself without disguise. When you speak only to be accepted, your words dissolve before they reach the air. When you live only to avoid mistakes, you give the world nothing to remember. Think about the people who stay in your mind. They're not always the most intelligent, wealthy, or beautiful. They're the ones who speak like they mean it, who look you in the eye and make you feel, for that moment, like you're the only person in the world. They offer pieces of themselves, stories that aren't polished but are real. They laugh without checking if it's appropriate. They challenge ideas others leave untouched. You don't just hear them, you feel them. Jung believed that what draws us to someone is often the part of them that has made peace with their shadow, the messy, unpolished side most people hide. When someone carries their flaws without apology, it gives others permission to be human. That confidence is rare, and rare is interesting. Somewhere along the way, many lose it. They trade the unpredictable spark of their personality for routine. They begin speaking in the language of the crowd, hoping to fit in rather than stand out. They replace curiosity with habit, passion with small talk. And slowly, without meaning to, they become invisible. The truth is, people aren't drawn to perfection. Perfection is sterile. It offers no story, no struggle, no risk. People are drawn to authenticity, to the man who's lived enough to have scars, to the woman whose laughter carries both joy and a hint of grief. They are drawn to those who show their edges. If you've ever felt overlooked, forgotten in the background, it might not be because others are blind. It might be because you've hidden yourself so well that even you can't remember the last time you felt unmistakably alive. The fire hasn't gone out. It's just been buried under the weight of playing it safe. The room still waits for the version of you who walks in and is fully there, present, unfiltered, willing to speak even if your voice shakes, to live as if the day matters because it does. And when that happens, people won't just hear you. They won't just see you. They'll remember you. Start small. You don't have to move across the world, change careers, or reinvent yourself overnight. The shift happens in the way you live each day, in the choice to bring life back into your voice, your eyes, your presence. Think of the last conversation you had where you were fully engaged, not just waiting for your turn to speak, but genuinely curious. You asked questions because you wanted to hear the answers, not because you were filling silence. People feel that. Curiosity is rare in a world where most are too busy thinking of their reply to truly listen. Carl Jung believed that connection begins when the self is no longer split, when you stop presenting a public mask that hides your real thoughts and feelings. The problem is, most people wear the mask so long they forget it's there. You can feel it when someone talks to you from behind one. The words might be polite, even charming, but something about them slides off you. It's only when the mask drops, even for a moment, that we lean in. Imagine two men at a gathering. One talks endlessly about his work, carefully selecting words to sound impressive. The other tells a story about the time he failed spectacularly, the wrong train, the lost bag, the stranger who helped him with nothing to gain. The second man's story isn't polished, but his eyes light up as he tells it. You can feel he's not performing, he's sharing. And sharing is magnetic. You want to be interesting? Live in a way that gives you something to share. Not for social media, not for bragging, but for the moments you'll carry into conversations, the books you've read, the people you've met, the skills you've tried to learn even if you're terrible at them. The mind that's always learning, always exploring, is a mind that others want to be around. And presence, never underestimate it. When you speak, stop fidgeting with your phone. Look at people, not as if you're searching for approval, but as if you're really there with them. There's a quiet power in giving someone your full attention. Jung would say it's the meeting of two souls, a moment where both become more real. Change the way you speak about your own life, too. Drop the self-deprecation that's meant to be charming but actually hides your confidence. Tell your stories without apology. If something excites you, let it show. If you're moved, don't smother it under a joke. Emotion, when honest, is what makes people remember you long after the words have faded. And then, there's action. People are drawn to those who do. You don't need grand adventures, but you do need movement. Try something new each month. Learn a skill that's completely outside your work. Volunteer. Travel to the next town just to see what's there. Every new experience becomes a thread in the tapestry of who you are. And the richer the tapestry, the more others want to see it. The truth is, you won't be interesting to everyone. Nor should you be. But when you begin living with curiosity, presence, and the courage to drop the mask, you'll find the right people can't help but lean in. Because interesting isn't something you do to get attention. It's what happens when you're fully alive. Have you ever felt yourself fade out of people's attention? Not in a dramatic way. No fights, no rejections, just a slow, quiet vanishing. You'd be in the room, but the conversation, your subscription and comment aren't just numbers. They're signals that decide what video comes next. Share your thoughts or ideas in the comments. They often become the foundation for new stories. Interestingly, over 90% of viewers watch my videos without subscribing. That's okay. It means the content pulls you in. But subscribing helps you stay updated with the next parts. Hit subscribe, and let's create the next video together. Invitation would drift around you. Invitations came less often. Messages slowed. It was as if you had become part of the background, the wallpaper of other people's lives. If that's ever happened to you, then you know the sting. And you also know how powerful it feels when, one day, people start noticing you again. I've seen it happen. There was a man I knew, quiet, polite, always in the corner at gatherings. Not shy, exactly, but muted. He didn't offer stories, didn't interrupt, didn't risk saying something wrong. Months later, he was different. He walked into the same room, and suddenly there was a weight to his presence. He'd been traveling, learning to cook, reading voraciously. He started conversations about things that lit him up inside. People leaned in, not because his life was suddenly glamorous, but because he was alive in it. This is the first truth. People respond to your own engagement with life. If you move through your days half asleep, no one will chase you awake. But if you're curious, growing, and willing to share that growth, others feel it. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And when you begin becoming, people notice. The shift doesn't happen because you demand attention. It happens because you stop hiding. You bring parts of yourself forward again. Your humor, your perspective, your questions. You take small risks in conversation, telling the story you'd normally keep to yourself, admitting what excites you, or even disagreeing when it matters. That unpredictability, that willingness to be seen, is what draws people closer. It also changes how they treat you. When you step out of invisible mode, the way others speak to you shifts. They start to expect more from you, and they give more in return. Jokes land better. Conversations go deeper. Your presence starts to influence the room instead of just filling it. But here's the part people don't tell you. Regaining your presence means letting go of the fear that you'll lose it again. You have to keep feeding your own interest in life, because the moment you stop, the old habits creep back in. It's not about performing. It's about living in a way that constantly renews your energy, so you don't have to try to be interesting. So let me ask you, have you ever come back from that invisible place? Have you ever felt people look at you differently because you'd changed something in yourself? What did you do, and how did it feel to have the air in the room shift when you spoke? Sometimes, the distance between unnoticed and unforgettable is smaller than we think. It begins with deciding to show up, not just physically, but with every part of yourself that you've been keeping in the dark. Carl Jung often spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to meet the expectations of society. It's useful, even necessary. But over time, some people become trapped inside that mask, forgetting it was ever a choice. They speak, dress, and act only in ways that feel safe. They avoid anything that might cause friction or draw too much attention. Slowly, their real personality slips into the shadows, and they become predictable, and predictability, over time, fades from view. When you begin to step out of that mask, something remarkable happens. People feel the difference before they understand it. A spark returns to your eyes. Your gestures change. Your words carry more weight. It's not because you've suddenly become better. It's because you're showing the parts of yourself that were hidden. Jung believed that when the conscious self reclaims the traits it has buried, life regains its vitality. This is called individuation, becoming whole again. Think of someone who's been in the background for years. Then, one day, they speak with conviction about something they believe in. Maybe it's an idea, a story from their past, or a challenge they're facing. Their voice is steady, their words unfiltered. The room grows quieter. People listen, not because the topic is groundbreaking, but because the person speaking is present, fully there, unmasked. This shift alters relationships in subtle but profound ways. When you are authentic, others begin to recalibrate how they see you. Friends who once overlooked your ideas now seek your opinion. Colleagues who barely noticed your presence now value your input. Even strangers respond differently. They feel the confidence you carry, and it makes them curious. But there's another layer. When you reveal more of yourself, you give others permission to do the same. Authenticity is contagious. The more you show that you are unafraid to be seen as you truly are, the more you invite deeper, more genuine connections. It's not about impressing, it's about resonance. Of course, stepping back into visibility carries risks. Some people will be uncomfortable with your change. They may prefer the version of you that stayed silent, that didn't disrupt the balance. But Jung would say that growth often disturbs the old order, and that's a sign you're on the right path. Those who value you will adjust to your presence. Those who don't were never truly seeing you in the first place. The beauty is that you don't need to force this transformation. You don't have to become louder or more dramatic. You simply have to live in alignment with what you truly think, feel, and value. Speak when you have something to say. Share experiences that matter to you. Let your natural interests lead you into new experiences, because those experiences will naturally make you more engaging. Once you start living this way, people can feel it. They might not be able to explain why you seem different, but they'll sense it in the way you hold yourself, in the steadiness of your gaze, in the unspoken confidence that comes from knowing you're no longer hiding. And perhaps the most powerful part? You won't just be interesting to others, you'll be interested in your own life again. Sometimes the most magnetic changes are the ones no one sees you make. They begin quietly, without an announcement, in the privacy of your own decisions. Take Daniel, for example. For years, he stayed quiet at work, blending into the background during meetings. His life outside the office was small: home, TV, sleep, repeat. One day, without telling anyone, he signed up for a weekend photography class. At first, it was awkward. He didn't know the terms, his shots were mediocre, but something shifted. He started walking through the city with his camera, noticing details he'd ignored before. The way morning light hit brick walls, the patterns in rain puddles, the stories etched into strangers' faces. Soon, people at work noticed the photos he shared online. Conversations began. His presence grew, not because he tried to be interesting, but because he was genuinely engaged in something new. Then there was Maria. She had always been the listener in her friend group, the one who absorbed everyone's stories but rarely shared her own. It wasn't that she didn't have experiences. She just didn't think anyone cared. After a trip to visit her grandmother in a remote village, she came back with stories so vivid her friends hung on every word. The smell of bread baking at dawn, the wisdom in her grandmother's simple phrases, the quiet beauty of evenings without electricity. Maria told them without rushing, without performance. Carl Jung would say she had touched something authentic within herself, and that authenticity drew others to her like light draws the moth. And then there's the subtle art of showing care. James, who never thought of himself as particularly charismatic, started paying attention to the small things, remembering the details people mentioned in passing, following up on their challenges, offering a book when someone expressed interest in a topic. It wasn't manipulation, it was genuine interest. Over time, people began to seek him out because he made them feel seen. Jung believed that when we connect with others from a place of wholeness, we naturally give them space to be more themselves. That's what James was doing without even realizing it. The pattern is the same. When you invest in your own life, when you allow your interests, values, and stories to grow, your presence changes. You start giving people something real to connect with. You're not trying to perform. You're living in a way that makes performance unnecessary. And perhaps the most overlooked aspect? Confidence comes from action. Not imagined action, not planning, but doing. Each small choice, learning a skill, starting a conversation, exploring a new place, adds another layer to your character. Those layers are what people feel when they're around you. They may not be able to name it, but they know you're not static. You're moving, evolving, alive. Jung once wrote, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases." The point isn't to copy what makes someone else interesting. It's to find the combination of curiosity, experience, and presence that is yours alone. That is what turns invisible into unforgettable. The fascinating thing about change is that you rarely have to announce it. People can feel it before you say a word. It's in the way you stand, the rhythm of your speech, the calm in your eyes. Something about you tells them, this person is not who they were before. And that signal reaches even those who once looked past you as if you weren't there. Carl Jung believed that the psyche speaks through subtle signs, posture, tone, the energy you project without conscious effort. When you start living with purpose and authenticity, those signs shift naturally. You don't need to act confident. Your body begins to carry the weight of self-trust on its own. You don't need to force conversation. Your curiosity and engagement pull words out of you without strain. I remember a man named Victor who had been the quiet one in every room for years. People rarely sought his opinion. He never seemed eager to give it. Then something happened. He took up boxing, not to fight anyone else, but to fight the version of himself that had grown too comfortable in the shadows. Months later, he was different. He still wasn't loud, but when he spoke, people listened. He held himself like someone who knew he could withstand pressure. Even those who'd ignored him before began to include him in discussions, sensing a new steadiness. Or think of Elena. She had always been overlooked in her office, the type who got the work done but was never invited to the after-hours gatherings. After she started learning a new language and volunteering at a local cultural center, her energy changed. She spoke with more expression, her humor sharpened, and she carried stories from her experiences into everyday conversations. People noticed. Even the ones who once dismissed her began leaning in, drawn to the warmth she now radiated. It's important to understand, this isn't about impressing people. If you change only to win attention, it feels hollow, and others sense that too. Real transformation happens when you live for your own growth, your own curiosity, your own standards. The attention that follows is a side effect, not the goal. And when that attention comes, it changes the dynamic. Those who ignored you may act surprised, even uncomfortable. Some will test you, to see if this new version is real. Stand firm. Jung wrote, the world will ask you who you are, and if you do not know, the world will tell you. When you show them you know, through action, not speeches, they adjust. They start to meet you at your new level. The beauty is that this shift doesn't fade if it's genuine. You don't have to keep up an act. There's no act at all. You've simply become someone more engaged with life, and that engagement keeps feeding itself. And here's the quiet truth. The most lasting respect you'll ever earn doesn't come from winning people over. It comes from living in such a way that their recognition or indifference no longer controls you. Ironically, that's when they finally start to pay attention. There comes a moment when you realize that becoming interesting was never about adding more achievements, more possessions, more performances. It was about removing what was never truly you. The layers of pretending. The reflex to agree when you disagree. The habit of speaking in ways that don't reveal what you actually think. Carl Jung often spoke about the process of individuation, the journey toward becoming a whole person. He described it not as the acquisition of new traits, but as the integration of the parts we've hidden, denied, or abandoned. In other words, you don't become magnetic by creating a persona that pleases everyone. You become magnetic by living in alignment with the person you already are when no one is watching. Think about the last time you met someone who left an impression. It wasn't necessarily because they were the loudest in the room. More often, it was because they carried themselves with quiet certainty. They didn't rush to fill silence. They weren't afraid of it. They didn't talk to prove they belonged. They talked because they had something to say. And when they listened as if they had nothing more important to do. This is the paradox. The more you chase people's attention, the more it slips away. The more you live in a way that makes you engaged, alive, and curious, the more attention becomes a natural byproduct. It's not about putting on a show. It's about building a life so rich in experience and meaning that others can sense it the moment they meet you. You start to notice changes in yourself before anyone else does. Your thoughts are clearer. Your voice is steadier. The things that used to drain you, pointless conversations, hollow approval, no longer hold the same power. People see the difference, but what matters most is that you feel it. And when you feel it, the world responds. You'll see it in the way strangers make eye contact longer, in how friends start asking for your opinion, and how those who once overlooked you now take a step closer when you speak. It's not magic. It's the undeniable pull of someone who knows who they are. Jung once said, The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This isn't a privilege reserved for the lucky few. It's an open invitation, waiting for you to accept. And when you do, you'll find that being interesting isn't something you perform. It's the natural consequence of living fully awake. So perhaps the real question was never, how can I get people to notice me? But rather, how can I live so deeply that I notice myself again? When you answer that, you'll never have to worry about fading into the background again. If you've listened this far, it means something in these words spoke to you. Maybe you recognized yourself in the moments of silence, in the seasons when you felt invisible. Or maybe you've already started your return, piece by piece, choice by choice, becoming the version of yourself that feels real again. I want you to remember one thing. You don't owe the world a performance. You owe yourself a life that feels alive from the inside out. When you live that way, the right people will always find you. Thank you for spending this time with me, for thinking deeply, for daring to look at yourself with honesty. If this story resonated, subscribe so we can keep walking this path together, exploring, questioning, and finding the truths that make us stronger. Every thought you share in the comments matters. Your story might be the spark someone else needs to change theirs. So, are you ready to be remembered?